So we were talking about Beast Wars as a podcast about two comedians rewatching the 1990s TV series Beast Wars Transformers. Although we are discussing a children's television show, the podcast itself is not intended for children. So we were talking about Beast Wars.
We were talking about Beast Wars. I'm Phil Thomas.
I'm Andy Hunter, and today we are talking about Beast Wars Season 1, Episode 7, Fallen Comrades.
Yeah, my first question was, who is the fallen comrade? And in the beginning of the episode, Optimus just kind of anticlimactically gets shot and has to stay home. And I'm like, oh, because he's the fallen comrade.
I think it's the protoform, though, because he does say to Dinobot, "That's one of my comrades, and I don't want to pussyfoot around."
Oh, does he say comrade?
I'm pretty sure he does.
Okay, that makes sense.
This episode is written by Bob Forward, one of the two head writers, along with Larry DiTilio. The episode starts with, rather than a scenic fake helicopter shot of something on Earth, something on this mysterious two-mooned planet.
Too many moons.
We see a stasis pod in orbit entering the atmosphere. And so we're following up on the stasis pods that the Maximals ejected in the first episode.
And you'll also notice there's another shot of something entering Earth's atmosphere and then an animal looking up from whatever it's doing to look at it. I'm about to add this to Beast Wars Bingo.
Yeah, if only that tiger had been lounging, reading a book the way Optimus had been a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, no, this tiger was filling out a Sudoku.
Rhinox says, hey, a stasis pod is entering the orbit. He measures the time of its descent in seconds, not some variant of cycles.
Mm-hmm.
They do reference it being over 100 clicks away. So now they are using clicks as a unit of distance rather than megaquads. Click is U.S. military slang for a kilometer. Optimus is like, I gotta fly there right away and get there before the Predacons do. Dinobot, however, is very concerned that Optimus will be racing into a trap. And he turns out to be right, because Megatron has sent Waspinator and Pterosaur to ambush him immediately after he leaves the Maximal base.
Yeah. Once again, it's rare that Dinobot is right, but he's consistently right about Megatron. I think it's also rare here that Optimus is blinded by something akin to hubris. And he makes, in terms of apeshit versus bullshit, I think he makes a bullshit move here. He channels an Optimus. I would have charged out of there too. The only thing I would have done differently is I wouldn't have spent any wasted time on, what are they called? Words. And like the other observation I had is that Optimus is the first fallen comrade.
Yeah.
And Dinobot mentioned something about like better to die in battle. Do you remember this line? Either Optimus, I would prefer to die in battle rather than fail, blah, blah, blah. And I took that as foreshadowing of what happens to him in season 2.
I don't think I caught that. I did enjoy the exchange as Dinobot promises to give Optimus a great eulogy. And Optimus assuring him that he's fine. And Dinobot is like, well, are you sure? It would have been a really great eulogy. It reminded me a bit of Bring Out Your Dead from Monty Python.
I'm not dead. There. He says he's not dead. I'm not. Well, he will be any moment.
I did catch that today Optimus refers to his jets as primal jets rather than prime jets.
He calls them primal jets.
Yeah.
Man, Bob and Larry really need to compare notes before they write different episodes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also inconsistent whether or not Optimus even does have to say something to start flying, or because sometimes he just takes off and other times he's like, prime jets on. After Optimus assures Dinobot that he's not dead, there's, to me, was a bit of an awkward moment when Dinobot picks Optimus up. Were we supposed to think it was just funny how he was able to grab him by the chest and lift him up one-handed? Or were we supposed to think Dinobot was maybe about to hurt him or kiss him? Or it seemed like they lingered on that a little too long. Or did the episode just run like 3 seconds short or something and they had to pad it?
My take from that was that we're supposed to be impressed that if Dinobot wanted to, he could just pick up Optimus and carry him around one-handed at any point. And I thought that was a cool character building flex.
Right, that works. This episode is starting to establish some rules about the stasis pods. They contain protoforms, although exactly what that means isn't elaborated on quite yet. But we do have a bit of a sense of, because in the pilot, they referred to all the stasis pods, and you and I were thinking, like, at this point in the pilot, are we meant to believe that these are basically maximal embryos waiting to be born, or are they Maximals who just went into stasis for a long trip? And now it seems like they are, since a protoform can be reprogrammed to being a Predacon, it needs special instructions to scan the surroundings to get its new beast mode and stuff. I'm thinking we're meant to believe that, yes, protoforms are newborns, essentially.
Okay, that's interesting. I had a different take. I do want to reference something that happens later in the episode. So let's pick up this topic then.
Okay. So, since Optimus has been taken out, Rhinox, Cheetor, and Rat Trap head off. Optimus has to go into the restoration chamber, and Dinobot's tail spinning shield thing got blasted, and so he needs to recuperate too. Which is something I had always kind of wondered. The show never really delves into, like, what if Dinobot did drop that thing? Is he not able to transform into beast mode because that's his tail? I guess this episode maybe sort of implies that he couldn't. Oh, although then we do see him, I mean, he is in beast mode. I guess it's just, like, we know that when they're in beast mode, they have a bit of self-repair going on.
That's really funny. I never actually thought about that. Like, if Cheetor dropped his guts gun, would he not be able to eat in beast mode?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing that's easy to wave away in a show, but when you actually have the toys that the show is nominally made to sell you, oh yeah, if you lose Dinobot's tail, then fine, you're going to have a Velociraptor with no tail.
So there is one other thing I wanted to point out at this point. So Dinobot anticipates what Megatron will do, and he doesn't. And then you cut to Megatron, and Megatron anticipates what the Maximals will do, and that happens. And he's like, oh, Optimus and somebody else are probably going to have to stay protecting the base, and the rest of them will go off. And this is where I started to get a little bit annoyed with how much Megatron can anticipate their moves. I wish there was a little bit of a different angle thrown in. Maybe something's not completely right.
Yeah, it is definitely a trope that I feel like this episode managed it just fine, but there are many works of fiction where it's just the bad guy is just so impossibly ahead of the good guys and has planned for every single contingency. And it's like, when did you have time to do all this? You know, like, how did, like, nobody is this omniscient.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the feeling I got. But, you know, I'll give them a mulligan on that, and we can keep going. It's a kid's show.
Yeah. Waspinator and Pterosaur then attack Rhinox, Rat Trap, and Cheetor. They just miss them with their weapons over and over again. So then they decide to just ram the ice bridge to destroy it, which I'm guessing they just didn't trust themselves to hit the ice bridge if they tried to shoot it. So let's just crash through it.
I thought that was really funny. It also looked like the same bridge from the pilot that they used that paint bucket tool and they just clicked on it and turned it white.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, gotta have hacks.
There was a moment where they surprised the audience by not doing something we would have expected. There's a bridge. Obviously, for a Beast Wars bingo moment, you would think they'd be on the bridge gets shot.
And then have to run while the bridge is collapsing, jump, and then be hanging on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. There's a 2-for-1. But they blew up the bridge before anybody could get on it. And I was like, oh, thank God.
Rat Trap says we'll have to take the long way around. And it just made me think of just how you don't have to play D&D for very long before you learn that you always make sure your character has rope, because there are just so many things that can be solved with rope in an adventurous kind of setting. And it made me think, like, the Maximals never bring, like, a bag of supplies with them. You know, they have what their bodies contain. Like, you know, the only person who has any rope is Tarantulas because he's a spider. But if the Maximals had like a backpack with some rope or something, maybe they still could have made it across that without having to take the long way.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So they go to a snowy area. Where do we think, in relation to Earth, if hypothetically this was an Earth-sized planet to that extent, Like, where did they go? And then did they go to Alaska? Did they go to the North Pole? Or did they go up to the top of a mountain in Colorado, which is a lot closer to Horseshoe Bend? Like, how far would they be planning to go?
Yeah, well, I guess it's if we take the terminology at face value, it was 100 kilometers. So I don't think that's far enough to get you up to Canada. So yeah, maybe it is a mountain in Colorado. Not that, I guess at least in modern times, tigers are native to that area. I do have some trivia, which now is a fine time to begin. White tigers are not Arctic tigers. They're albino Bengal tigers. And they have blue eyes rather than green. They're very rare in the wild. The last known one in the wild apparently was shot in 1958. So good job, humans.
It's probably my uncle.
But I think it doesn't really bear wondering that much. I mean, because also gorillas and rhinoceroses aren't native to North America, but Rhinox and Optimus scanned a gorilla and rhino who were having a conversation with each other.
I assume that the narrative of how that albino Bengal tiger ended up in the Arctic is that the other tigers made so much fun of him that he just wanted to get out there. Although I think it's implied that that tiger that we first see, the actual tiger, is a female.
Yeah, or at least I think this episode doesn't really say anything one way or the other, but in later episodes when we know of Tigertron having his tiger friend, I believe he does refer to them as female.
Tiger friend, huh? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Tigertron always trolling for pussy.
After Waspinator and Pterosaur take out the bridge, Rat Trap is able to call the Maximal HQ. It's a bit staticky, but today there's no energon interference. And then Dinobot is able to activate Optimus's quote-unquote core consciousness, which a schematic shows to be where his gorilla brain would be. Although, of course, we know that he doesn't actually have a gorilla brain in there because his face comes apart and becomes his chest and there's no brain hanging out there. So I found that a little funny. And I also thought, like, I would have had the projection of Optimus's face being his robot face as his true self. But instead we see it being his gorilla face is the projection.
Huh, that's really interesting. I didn't go as deep on analyzing it. I wish I had. The only thing that occurred to me there was, here's yet another situation where Optimus is now astral projecting out of his body. Like, this is episode 7. How many times has this happened already? It feels like 4.
I think just 2. I think it happened in this episode and in Chain of Command, where he was inside the alien device, but he was able to still call the Maximals.
Okay. 2. I'll revise that.
Still more than you'd expect.
Yeah.
And also, it seems like this is something that would be very useful later on. Like, I think there are times when Rhinox is in there and like, oh, well, if only we could talk to Rhinox and he would tell us how to build a new thing. But it doesn't happen. I guess maybe it depends on just how damaged the robot was before they went into the chamber. So in this scene, Optimus's core consciousness projection seems a little bit subdued or sleepy, which I thought was because, oh, okay, you're accessing some underlying part of Optimus, but not his true full personality. But then later on, when the core consciousness talks, it seems to have his regular amount of vim and verve. So, who knows?
Yeah, that was a little strange, but it also does feel like foreshadowing again for the beginning of season 2.
Yeah. The word slag happens a couple of times. One is when Rhinox says that was some cold slag after Waspinator and Pterosaur take out the bridge. And then later on, when Dinobot is fighting Megatron, or rather when he turns down his offer, he says, eat slag. So it seems to me like this show refers to slag both as specifically when something is melted down into slag, but also as a stand-in for the word shit.
That's a good point. Like, I could see it having both meanings reasonably.
Yeah, like if you're a robot, then melted down slag would be a waste product, perhaps, of robot society. Yeah,
maybe they do poop slag and we just never see it.
Yeah, which I think was a missed opportunity. You know, kids are interested in potty stuff. So. Dinobot and Optimus hatch a plan to send a laser pulse bouncing off of one of the moons to send instructions to the stasis pod. And then Megatron shows up and is like, hey, Optimus is KO'd. Why don't you and me take over? And Dinobot is like, eat slag. He gets ambushed by Tarantulas and Scorponok. Then he activates the auto weapons. And I thought it was going to be a cheesy kitty type of joke where Tarantulas and Scorponok just stand there stupidly for a second rather than trying to get out of the way. But instead, I did find it really funny that instead what happens is the cannons just lock on to movement. And so Tarantulas tries to take a tiny step and gets blasted for it. I laughed out loud at that. And then Scorponok, his nervous shaking is what attracts the cannon's attention.
I thought that was pretty funny too. I also got a natural laugh out of that.
Yeah. And then when Optimus is repaired and he's putting Dinobot in the CR chamber, he has to deactivate the autocannons while he leaves. So I guess unlike the Predacons, who have been able to program their guns to only target Maximals, I guess the Maximals auto weapons will just target anything.
Yeah, I wonder why they're investing so much in building up those plot points. It seems like something that they don't need to invest all that time in. I don't think that plays a huge role going forward, right?
I appreciate it because in the pilot, the Maximals have to race against the Predacons to reach that mountain full of energon. But what if one side or the other, knowing that the entire other team would be racing toward the mountain, just went and wrecked the other one's ship or destroyed it or something? Mm-hmm. And then oh yeah, you've got a mountain full of energon. Great. Good luck doing anything with it now that you don't have a ship that can refine it or whatever. So I think it might be something that kids wouldn't wonder about. But I, as an adult watching it, I appreciate them establishing why the two teams can't just stroll into each other's bases and mess up stuff.
Okay. Really good point. I guess I'll remember going forward that that's where we're at with this technology. The Predacons, autoguns, can tell Maximals from Predacons, but the Maximals cannot. They either turn them on or turn them off.
Yeah, although we'll see if that is the case every time, because sometimes tech is a little bit wibbly-wobbly in the show. But anyway, I found it really funny that somehow Megatron reaches the stasis pod seconds after Rhinox, Rat Trap, and Cheetor do, even though he was coming from the Maximal base like they were, but probably at least a half hour later because he'd been there fighting with Dinobot. So I can only assume he took some kind of evil shortcut that the Maximals never would. Maybe he killed an elephant and turned its ivory into a pole vault that let him get there faster, leap over that where the bridge was or something.
Oh, I thought you were implying that he pressed a button in the side of a mountain and there was just a conveyor belt built for villains. And he just took that. He's just standing there in T-Rex mode. Renaissance paintings going by him. There's a chandelier. He's just standing there. He looks at his wristwatch, and then suddenly he shows up there.
Passing by in the other direction is Cobra Commander or some other cartoon villain. Dr. Claw, maybe.
There you go. All the metal ones. Destro, Dr. Doom.
Yeah. So anyway, Megatron arrives. He threatens the tigers. There are now 2 tigers there. Hint, hint. And Maximals are fine, you can reprogram this protoform into a Predacon. Don't kill innocent tigers. It takes Waspinator forever to blast the stasis pod door open, which I found really weird because we had already seen that door open and an Energon surging hand come out of it. And also, as we'll learn in a moment, the protoform inside already left. So I guess maybe Tigertron just closed the stasis pod door behind him really well.
Oh yeah, he turned the little lock on it horizontally, which means that when it shuts, it locks by itself.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's oh, I left the keys in the stasis pod. Oh man.
Oh, good luck getting that open. I also wanted to make this observation in the last episode. So Waspinator's using eye lasers to try to open the stasis pod, right?
Yeah.
Can somebody definitively tell me who's got eye lasers and who doesn't?
Nope. These characters have all different kinds of weaponry. Today Waspinator is using eye beams, but other times I think we see him holding a gun that is yellow and black wasp stripes that shoots little stingers. Pterosaur has both guns that he holds and also shoulder cannons. Optimus has both shoulder cannons and the shotguns in his arm.
But Pterosaur uses eye lasers in the previous episode.
Oh, yeah. Although, yeah, who knows how much we can put stock in that. Maybe he's just so full of unstable energon that it's coming out of his eyes.
Yeah, maybe it's like a power thing. You can summon it, and Dinobot can always do that, but everybody else has to try really hard to do it.
Yeah, maybe. So the stasis pod is empty. Wears a new Maximal, and then Tigatron is revealed. He starts wailing at the Predacons. All the Maximals are wailing at the Predacons. Optimus is flying in. He just shoots for some missiles from the sky, which made me think of that oft-quoted joke from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So anyway, I started blasting.
Oh, I don't think I'm in on that joke.
Oh, I think it's just something that Danny DeVito's character said at one point, which then became, I think, just a meme, perhaps.
That's funny.
Then we see the Predacons standing there, and they're just getting shot all around them, but not getting hit. And it made me a bit empathetic to why, in the follow-up series, Beast Machines, they had the bad guy being a fleet of a bunch of mindless drones. Because that way you can have the good guys actually land hits and take out bad guys without... 1, having to make the good guys be killers, and 2, having to create new bad guy characters. Because when a scene like this happens and the Predacons are surrounded and just totally getting wailed on, but nobody's actually getting hit and they just are able to run away, kind of makes the good guys look a little bit incompetent.
That's a really good observation. I didn't catch that, but I will take that with me going forward into other episodes.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I know there are certainly some times where the good guys do really hit and take out a bad guy, in which case we're sometimes, I think, probably left to wonder, oh, okay, who then dragged this damaged Predacon back to the Predacon base to heal them? But that's neither here nor there. So after the Predacons retreat, Tigatron explains at first his identity circuits were damaged, and he initially believed himself to just be a tiger, and then he saw a kindred spirit in the Maximals when they protected the tigers, but that his identity circuits need to finish repairing themselves, and until then he'll feel more tiger than bot. And I did like how the Maximals respected that, and they're not saying like, oh, you're just going through a phase, or we know better, or stop playing identity circuits politics.
Circuits politics. So this is the point where I wanted to mention the thing I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
So this is how I think it works. They can go into stasis and not change forms over short distances. But if they're going over long distances and they need to go into long-term status, they have to kind of dissolve into a protoform version of themselves and then like take their memory and put it into a part of the stasis pod so that when they get there, they'll be reassembled. And they're depending on the data stored in the stasis pod to get them back online. So since they're like protoform nanotechnology, when Tigatron comes back, the information is in his system somewhere. Like his identity and memory is there. But there's going to have to be some processing and growth for his brain to actually remember like where that is and link all of that back together. So until then, he's got this other like default identity that is tiger based.
So you're thinking that given enough time, Tigatron would eventually piece himself back together and be able to say things like, oh yeah, back when I was on Cybertron, my favorite Energon restaurant was whatever.
Maybe. But I guess what I'm also implying about going into protoform mode is like putting something in the freezer. When you thaw it again, it doesn't come out exactly the way it was when you put it in. You're just kind of crossing your fingers that when you nuke this thing, it's going to come out and still be really tasty. So I think coming out of protoform mode back into a robot mode, I think is a much dicier process than they would like it to be. But it's the only option if you have to go into long-term stasis.
That does make sense. But I just wonder why a robot would need to go into stasis for a long trip. Because unlike humans, robots don't age. So a robot could be in a ship for 1 million years and, you know, could be like, oh, it'll take us 1 million years to get there. Or are you just thinking like, well, these 100 protoforms or however many would have just gotten really bored on the ship. So they're like, all right, fine. Optimus, Rat Trap, Cheetor, Rhinox. You four are the unlucky ones who have to stay awake for the whole trip and pilot the ship. Everybody else just gets to take a nap.
Well, did you see the movie Prometheus in the Alien universe?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Maybe the first Alien movie is like this. There's a staff that's keeping the ship running, and then there's a bunch of people on board who are in stasis.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it's like a resource management thing where they don't have to bring as much food or they don't have to bring as much energon on the ship. And two, it's probably just a really long ride.
All right. Yeah, I know we have a few more stasis pods come down, so we will see how they handle the issue. How affirmatively do they state one way or the other whether these protoforms are somewhat deactivated existing bots or are they newborns, essentially?
Maybe they were robots on the ship, and since the ship got attacked and they had to jettison the stasis pods, maybe part of that is that they no longer have access to the life support systems on the ship. So the stasis pod has to convert them into a protoform version to keep them alive.
So that the stasis pods actually would have been escape pods, essentially?
Yeah, well, they're stasis pods and they're escape pods. So if they were on the ship, they would tap into the ship's life support and they would stay in robot mode. But when they get jettisoned as escape pods, there isn't enough juice in the stasis pod to give them robot life support. So they have to go into a much more primitive form so that they can hold on to the resources that will keep them alive for as long as possible.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll see.
I'm just spitballing. I'm just pulling some apeshit bullshit here.
We'll see if the show does provide any clarification. But anyway, Optimus and the other Maximals are like, cool, yeah, you can stay up here. We could use a scout up here in the north. Optimus gives Tigatron a salute, but because of the size of his like gorilla arm, it looks like he's dabbing. Like he gives him a salute, but then on his way down, it really looks like he's dabbing.
It's really funny. Do you think that protoform was acknowledged to be a higher ranking officer than them?
No, just because I'm coming at it still from the point of view of the protoform had no life prior to this.
Oh, okay.
But I could be wrong. We'll see. Got a couple other pieces of trivia. We haven't mentioned any of the voice actors so far, which is remiss on our part. But Blue Mankuma debuts as Tigatron, and I really like the peaceful strength that he brings to the role.
Yeah, that's just an awesome voice acting.
Yeah. And apparently, the new Maximal was originally going to be a Beast Wars toy called Wolffang. But they opted to save some time and money by just tweaking and recoloring their Cheetor model.
That's interesting, because there is a toy variant of Cheetor that's Tigatron, right?
Yes, the Tigatron toy was just a recolor of Cheetor. So it is funny that they then in the show used the same shortcut.
That is really funny.
Although later on, when we meet Black Arachnia, even though the Black Arachnia toy had just been a recolor of Tarantulas, they made some radical adjustments to that model when creating her for the show.
And that works. I think we understand why.
Yeah, we'll get there when she shows up. Any other thoughts on Fallen Comrades?
So I don't think there were any bullet train montages or them hanging off anything. But we can do Maximize versus Terrorize. How many times do you think Maximize was said, and how many times do you think Terrorize was said?
I'm going to guess Maximize was 6 times, and Terrorize 3 times.
Whoa! Wow, you were really close.
Oh.
Maximize was said 5 times, and Terrorize was said 3 times.
All right. Well, yes.
Well done.
I will accept your applause and adulations.
And who knows? I might have missed a Maximize. You never know.
Yeah.
That's all I had on the episode. Good episode.
Yeah. Yeah, good episode. We've introduced a new character, and we'll see how often we see Tigatron again. I did find it funny the way Optimus said, I have a feeling we'll be meeting again. But that very much like rides the line between this is definitely a new character that we'll be seeing again, or maybe we'll see. We'll see what the fans say.
I can't solve this mystery. Can you?
All right, so that was Fallen Comrades. Thank you for listening. I've been Andy Hunter.
I've been Phil Thomas.
And now we have talked about Beast Wars.